A storm brews in the heart of Gaza. Abu al-Shabab, a name once synonymous with smuggling and lawlessness, now emerges at the center of a bewildering battlefield transformation. Joining forces with H4M4S, the radical splinter of Hamas, in attacks targeting the Israel Defense Forces, IDF. Just months ago, he was rumored to receive weapons from Israel itself. Now, whispers from the battlefield claim he's exchanging fire with the very state that allegedly armed him. Caught in the crossfire of contradiction is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose security doctrine once embraced divide and rule through proxy militias like Abu al-Shabab. But that tactic may have backfired. With Tehran's shadow looming large behind Hamas, a critical question rises from the smoke. Has Israel's rogue pawn turned into the frontline spear of an Iranian-backed insurgency? This is no conspiracy thriller. It is the anatomy of modern asymmetric war. A war where criminals become commanders, aid routes morph into battlegrounds, and militias become messages in a greater geopolitical dialogue. In this fog of war, loyalties bend, alliances twist, and power slips through fingers like desert sand. So we ask again, who is truly pulling the strings, and at what cost? What once seemed like a calculated risk is now spiraling into a strategic paradox. In late 2024, Israel's intelligence community quietly approved a shadow operation, channeling weapons and logistical support to Abu al-Shabab, a militia notorious for looting aid and trafficking arms. The logic was simple: use a localized gang to weaken Hamas from within, fracture its grip on Rafah, and allow Israel to reduce direct troop deployments. But this surgical proxy strategy has mutated. Today, sources on the ground report that Abu al-Shabab's fighters are engaging IDF units, often in parallel strikes with H4M4S, the radical militant cell reportedly financed by Iran's Quds force. Videos circulating online show both groups conducting joint patrols and, more alarmingly, coordinated assaults on Israeli checkpoints. The paradox is blistering. A militia armed by Israel is now allegedly fighting alongside Iran's ideological foot soldiers. A man once used as a tool to divide Hamas is now being hailed in radical forums as a resistor of Zionist occupation. Strategically, it represents a rupture in control, a blowback scenario where the puppet cuts its strings and redraws the map of influence. The symbolic image here is powerful. A scorpion, nurtured to bite the snake, now stings its own handler. This shift highlights the fragility of proxy warfare in asymmetric conflicts. In the absence of deep-rooted ideological alignment, a proxy can evolve, drift, and mutate. Abu al-Shabab was never a true ally. He was a free agent in a transactional war. And now that agent appears to have crossed into another camp, not out of loyalty, but out of opportunity, power, and vengeance. So now, the architects of this strategy must confront an uncomfortable truth. Did they create a solution or manufacture their next enemy? The curtain is lifting, and what lies behind it is a web of betrayal, shame, and weaponized secrecy. On June 28, 2025, a covert video leak shocked Gaza's underground networks. Armed units of Abu al-Shabab's militia moving in sync with H4M4S squads, not in opposition, but in joint tactical formations. Drone footage showed coordinated pincer movements around an IDF forward post near eastern Rafah. Precise, synchronized, and devastating. The footage, reportedly released by a defected Al-Qassam member, ignited a firestorm. Within hours, clan elders from the Abu Siahab family, the founding bloodline of the militia, issued a furious public declaration denouncing what they called an unholy alliance. In a rare broadcasted statement, Sheikh Ali al-Din, patriarch of the clan, declared, "To fight the occupier is one thing. To become a mercenary of the Persian sword is another. This treachery will not go unanswered." The implications were explosive. The betrayal wasn't just political. It was tribal, generational, and spiritual. Gaza's tribal structure, though frayed by war, remains a moral compass. And in that context, Abu al-Shabab had crossed a sacred line, aligning with an Iranian-funded faction that once bombed Sunni civilian targets. To Hamas, this wasn't just defection. It was blasphemy and insurgency. A tribunal was swiftly called, and charges of high treason were filed. On the encrypted messaging boards, pro-Hamas networks shared arrest warrants bearing Abu al-Shabab's face. What began as strategic manipulation had metastasized into moral revolt. And with that, the myth of control began to shatter. How do you govern a monster that no longer fears its maker? To truly grasp the tectonic shifts in Gaza's shadow war, one must follow the hands that fund, arm, and guide from the rear, far from the ruins of Rafah. In private meetings held between October and December 2024, high-ranking Israeli officials reportedly endorsed a plan to activate localized containment forces within Gaza. Abu al-Shabab's militia, disconnected from Hamas, rooted in tribal loyalty and willing to negotiate, seemed a perfect candidate. Netanyahu's office allegedly approved tactical supply drops, encrypted comms gear, and limited munitions under a doctrine named Opi Desert Lash, a strategy to fracture Hamas from within without committing more IDF boots on the ground. But the machinery of subversion outpaced its operators. Meanwhile, Tehran's Quds force expanded its influence. Following the death of Brigadier General Saeed Izzadi in a suspected Israeli drone strike, Iran doubled down on Gaza. Intelligence intercepted in June indicated increased cash transfers via Hezbollah intermediaries, fueling H4M4S's expansion. Their mission? Replace weakened Hamas cells with more radical, Tehran-loyal factions. Murmurs from defense analysts in Amman and Ankara suggest black market arms routing through the Sinai, funded partially by Emirati-based front companies. While Abu Dhabi officially denies involvement, some suspect its covert interest in shaping post-Hamas Gaza, possibly through proxy stabilization efforts via Abu al-Shabab. These are not isolated moves. They are coordinated layers of influence. Israel wants Hamas disarmed. Iran wants Hamas reshaped into something more loyal. The UAE wants control without occupation. And caught in the middle is a militia born of crime, molded by war, and now weaponized by geopolitics. The question is no longer who backs whom, but who can still control what they've created. In the theater of modern asymmetric war, few figures are as symbolic, chaotic, and contradictory as Yasser Abu al-Shabab. Born into the Bedouin Tarabin clan, Yasser grew up in the dust-blown outskirts of southern Gaza, a world governed less by ideology and more by tribal code and survivalist instinct. By age 20, he was already infamous. A black market operator, fluent in smuggling routes that slithered beneath the Egyptian border. In 2023, he was jailed by Hamas for alleged drug trafficking and collaborating with Salafi militants. By late 2024, he had escaped, or was possibly released. Then came the metamorphosis. He re-emerged as the protector of the convoys, commanding a militia called the Popular Forces, originally a ragtag group of ex-prisoners and disenfranchised Bedouins. Their stated mission: secure humanitarian aid from looters. But this benevolence masked a darker truth. Reports of extortion, hoarded UN food, and taxes on aid routes. Now, his image is everywhere. Fatigues, desert scarf, Kalashnikov slung casually. A warlord turned guardian, his face flickering across telegram groups, revered by some, reviled by others. But his symbolism runs deeper. To Israel, he was once a pawn, a buffer against Hamas. To Iran, he is perhaps a wild card, a disruptor of fragile balances. To his clan, he's a fallen son, redeeming tribal pride through fire and betrayal. He is the ghost in the machine of Gaza's collapse, a mirror reflecting the dangers of proxy reliance. Not a hero, not a villain, but a creature of war, shaped by everyone's interference and loyal to none. Behind the swirling dust of Gaza's front lines lies an intricate web of proxy warfare and covert influence, where local factions like Abu al-Shabaab's militia are merely the visible tip of a global chessboard, a game played by invisible hands from Tel Aviv to Tehran, Abu Dhabi to Beirut. For over a decade, Iran has used Gaza as a forward projection zone to pressure Israel, channeling support through Hamas, and now potentially through more radical offshoots like H4M4S. Intelligence sources suggest the Quds Force, Iran's elite foreign operations unit, intensified funding to Gaza following Israel's killing of Brigadier General Saeed Izzadi in June 2025, a man widely considered the linchpin of Tehran's Palestinian outreach. Iran's objective isn't just to defeat Israel militarily, it's to entangle it in perpetual sub-conflicts, exhausting its army, dividing its political leadership, and stretching its economy. By helping elevate H4M4S and co-opting militia leaders like Abu al-Shabaab, Iran fuels chaos while staying in the shadows. Meanwhile, Israel's gamble to support Abu al-Shabaab reflects a strategy pulled from Cold War playbooks. Empower small actors to destabilize larger threats, in this case, Hamas. It mirrors previous efforts with South Lebanon militias during the 1980s. But the Gaza experiment is now spiraling. A rogue militia, once seen as a pressure valve, has become a potential spark plug for regional fire. The Gulf's double game. Recent UN briefings cite suspicious arms shipments moving through Ras Al Khaimah, a UAE emirate long rumored to be a hub for gray zone intelligence activity. Satellite imagery revealed a convoy of armored vehicles tagged to an Emirati logistics firm parked near the Rafah corridor, a red flag for analysts watching Abu Dhabi's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Though the UAE publicly denounces all extremist factions, its deep rivalry with both Iran and political Islam, including Hamas, may push it toward secretly nurturing alternate power centers in Gaza, forces like Abu al-Shabaab's popular forces, designed not for resistance but future governance under Gulf influence. This is not Gaza in isolation. This is a regional proxy pattern. Yemen, Houthi, Iran versus Saudis, UAE, US, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iran versus pro-Western factions. Syria and Iraq, Iranian militias versus US and Israel air power. Gaza is simply the newest node, and Abu al-Shabaab is the latest asset turned liability. The front line is local. The war is regional. But the strategy is global. Gaza stands today at a bloody crossroads. What began as a calculated strategy, arming a localized militia to break Hamas's monopoly, has erupted into an unpredictable proxy war, dragging multiple foreign actors into a spiraling theater of conflict. Abu al-Shabaab, once a disposable pawn, now commands a hybrid force that blends clan loyalty, extremist doctrine, and opportunistic warfare. And his recent coordination with H4M4S signals not just a shift in allegiance, but a possible realignment of Gaza's power map. The IDF now finds itself battling not just Hamas, but fragments of its own creation, militias trained and armed through covert deals, now turned against them in a web of betrayal. Simultaneously, Iran tightens its grip through ideological offshoots and hidden funding streams. And somewhere between them, Gulf states like the UAE maneuver silently, sowing influence in the hopes of shaping Gaza's post-war future. The danger is no longer just rockets or raids, it's the collapse of any predictable logic of war. The battlefield is fractured, the players are multiplying, and loyalties shift like the sand dunes around Rafah. So now the world watches and asks, who still controls Abu al-Shabab? Is Israel's proxy fire now out of containment? Has Iran successfully infiltrated the very tool designed to undercut its influence? And most pressingly, whose war is this anymore? This conflict, once framed as Israel versus Hamas, now unfolds as a war of shadows between financiers, ideologues, spies, and survivors. Gaza has become both battleground and bargaining chip, and what rises from its ruins may not be peace, but the next proxy militia, waiting in silence. The strings are frayed. The puppets now pull back, and the fire, once lit, is no longer anyone's to control.